World Chess Championship, game number 9. Gukesh playing white, Ding Liren playing black. And we see a Catalan in this game. One of my favorite openings. We have a ChessGoals course on the Catalan, and this is one of the best ways to play against it. We see this early bishop to b4 check. You force the bishop to d2 and then retreat. And it looks like a waste of time spending 2 moves with that bishop, but the idea is this bishop does not want to be on d2. It's blocking the queen down the d file. It'd rather go to b2 directly. So the bishop's just a little bit clumsy here. Bishop g2, d5, knight f3, and these are all standard Catalan moves. This is called the closed Catalan. So black makes this big pawn chain in the middle. They decide not to capture on c4, and the c-pawn is not coming to c5 immediately. Now this move, rook d1, is slightly rare, and it works super well at the club level. It's actually a move that I recommend quite often. And the idea is you're just playing flexible. You want to eventually push for e4 and have your rook on the file of the black queen. But the position is pretty much equal here, and we're waiting to see if there's any new ideas from the players. And here's the first new idea. Gukesh D plays bishop to c3. It's not his own idea, probably, because this was played by Anish Giri against Hans Niemann in August of 2024 during their match. But what you're doing is you're putting the bishop on the longest diagonal of the board for the dark squares. Nice long-range position for the bishop. And then you probably want to stick this knight on d2 later. Yep, there it is. Okay, so now both sides bring their pieces to the center. Gukesh expands a bit on the queen side with b4. Strongest move to meet this is c5, which was played. Takes, takes. And here this has to be a position where Ding Liren is happy. He has completely equalized, and we're on move 15. Pawns are symmetric. There's really not much to write home about. The main difference here is actually this g2 bishop versus the e7 bishop. You could argue that maybe this g2 bishop is on a slightly stronger diagonal, but the e7 bishop also points down to the a3 square, so it's active on the queen side as well. These other two bishops pretty much are equal. They're both on their long diagonals. The knights are identical. The queens are identical. The d rooks are identical. There's one file, the b file, that's open. Very equal position so far. Queen b2, knight b6, bishop a5. So now things are starting to heat up a little bit. We see the knight pinned to the queen. Takes on c4. Knight takes c4, and this is putting a third attacker on the knight. So here Ding has to be a little bit careful. The strongest move might actually be knight takes c4. Knight takes knight, allowing the queen trade. But things get a little bit messy in that line. And Gukesh is a super strong calculator, and I don't know if that factored in, but Ding decides to play bishop takes f3, which is not the most precise move. It just gives a very tiny advantage to Gukesh. After bishop takes b6, that's the strongest move. Kind of inserting that, a takes b, bishop takes f3, rook a6. You can feel that Gukesh D just has a very slight pull here, right? Ding Liren is stuck playing defense, and now this f3 bishop is even stronger than its counterpart on e7. The e7 bishop is stuck playing defense. The f3 bishop cuts all the way through this diagonal, and the a8 square could be important for black to try to pressure a2, whereas the b1 square is easy to access for white to pressure b6. Now, at this point, we have a 13-minute think by Gukesh, and he plays queen to b5. Queen to b5 allows simplification. The strongest move according to the computer was knight to e5, and this can start to cause some headaches for black. The knight heads to c6, forking the rook and bishop. That's a big threat. And the fact that the a2 pawn is easy to defend for white, and the b pawn is easy to attack for white, whereas black can't really attack that a pawn well, and he's stuck playing defense on the b pawn. This is uncomfortable for black. So I think this position is around a 0.4 eval, and in the game we have a 0.0. So that was a good chance for Gukesh to push for a win. Instead, queen b5 played, rook takes a2, knight takes b6. And now what's going to happen is queen to b1, threatening d takes c5, because if d takes c5 right away, there's rook takes rook a5, winning the pawn back. And that just leads to a draw. So queen b1 played, threatening d takes c5. After rook b8 takes and the rook comes back, queen b5, now there's this nice tactic. Bishop takes c5. Chess.com gives this a brilliant symbol because you're sacrificing the bishop, and when white takes back, then you win the knight. And there was no way for Gukesh to avoid this. So we get this swap, and now we have an equal position except for the bishop versus knight imbalance. And there is an exciting moment coming up, so I'm just going to fast forward a bit and let you guys see this endgame. We get a rook swap. Ding is kind of bringing the king up. Gukesh appears to be waiting a bit more. Now we see this committal pawn on f4 and a trade. Now at this moment, the players seem to be content with a draw, but on the chess.com commentary, Anish Giri was getting a bit excited because there's this opportunity for Ding-Liren to create a position that is essentially lost for Gukesh in human versus human play, even if the computer thinks it's a draw with best play. So what he could have done coming up here is he could have played f5. Let's give white his move, rook b3, f5. And after king g3, rook e2, king f3, rook e1. And now if white sits and waits, there's this idea of rook f3 check. Now the king has to choose a direction. If the king goes to, let's show e3 first. Now there's rook h1. That's super uncomfortable for white, right? This could turn into a win. For example, rook a6, king f6, and rook takes h3 check coming up. If the king goes to g3, there's this clever move h4 check. After king takes, rook takes f4, creating a pass f pawn. Right, so now things are getting a lot more interesting. These pawns are pushing, this king's coming up, this rook is stuck playing defense on the d pawn. So this f5 move, going back to move 42, can create some problems for white. There's also this other idea that maybe black could play h4, so kind of cutting off the white king from these squares, and run the king around this way. And try to keep a situation where this king has to babysit both pawns, or the rook has to babysit a pawn. And the problem with everything being tied down is this king is free to run. So Ding-Liren had this chance. He could play for a win here, even though the computer says it's equal. But look what happens. This has been the story of the match. f6, rook a3, king up, check. And he just goes for a line where everything trades off. A rook pawn only, that's never going to be a win. They trade, draw agreed. So I think another missed opportunity for Ding-Liren to at least try for something. He's really not showing much fighting spirit, but he's just playing this cold, calculating style. And if a game is even close to a draw, he takes it. He only really took his chance in game number 1 to play for that win. But otherwise, he's been playing pretty passive chess and just playing solid defense. So that's the end of the game. Another draw agreed. I will have a recap for the next one. And hopefully we'll see some fighting chess out of both of the players. Thanks for watching, guys.